You are here now, and it's time to rest. Tonight, I'll tell you a story, slow and gentle, to help you fall asleep. Let your breathing soften. Let the noise of the day drift away, and let this story carry you. It comes from a time long ago, whispered in clay beneath the stars of old Babylon. As you listen, feel free to close your eyes. And if you're still awake, or listening from somewhere far across the world, leave a comment and tell me where you're tuning in from. Now, get comfortable. Let the story begin. The year was 580 BCE. The city of Babylon sat like a jewel at the center of the world. Her walls stretched for miles, her gates gilded with lapis lazuli and inscribed with the names of gods and kings. The Ishtar Gate stood like a divine threshold between the mortal and the eternal. Above it all rose the Esagila, the great temple of Marduk, and beside it, the mighty ziggurat at Timanangi, reaching for the heavens. Smoke drifted from temple altars. Merchants shouted from shaded stalls. Bronze bells rang as priestesses passed in procession. In the cool of morning, the city shimmered with order, wealth, and praise. But behind those walls, far from the king's palace and the perfumed gardens, there was another world, one of dust, clay, and silence, the scribal quarter. There, in a crooked alley shadowed by old storage towers and half-collapsed shrines, lived a man named Nabu Ramani. He was a scribe, but not like the others. Where other scribes busied themselves with tax ledgers, property disputes, and grain records, Nabu Ramani kept to the old words, the forgotten ones. He was fluent in Akkadian, of course, that was expected. But he had taught himself Sumerian, the language of the ancients, the language of the gods, some whispered. His chamber was narrow and windowless, lined with shelves stacked with tablets. Cracked, scorched, some worn so smooth the inscriptions could barely be read. His writing stylus was bone, polished to shine. A chipped oil lamp sat permanently at his desk, filling the room with the scent of burnt flax. While others measured barley for the temple granary, he studied ritual hymns from long-dead cities. While his peers copied royal decrees, he puzzled over creation epics buried beneath centuries of dirt. To most, he was invisible. To a few, he was mad. But to Nabu Ramani, he was close, closer than anyone to something long buried. He had not always been this way. As a child, he had lived in Kish, a city older than Babylon itself. His father had been a brickmaker, his mother a healer. But when a fire consumed half the quarter one summer, he was sent to Babylon to live with an uncle, a minor scribe in the temple's western offices. That was where he met Bel-Nadine, the master scribe. Bel-Nadine was ancient even then. His voice was cracked, and his eyes nearly blind, but his hands still moved with perfect precision. He taught Nabu Ramani the reed stylus before he was 12, and by 15, the boy could read most royal inscriptions without pause. But it was in Bel Nadine's private collection, the forbidden room behind the records office, that Nabu's real education began. There, he saw tablets written in the old tongue. "Why keep these if no one reads them?" he asked. Bel Nadine had smiled. "Because someone might." That memory came back often, especially on nights like this one. Outside, the heat of the day still clung to the walls, but within his chamber, Nabu Rimani sat motionless, hunched over a cracked piece of clay, barely wider than his palm. The cuneiform script on it was shallow and unfamiliar, a dialect even older than the standard Old Sumerian he had mastered. He turned it slowly under the lamplight. The tablet had been sent accidentally, or perhaps deliberately, in a recent shipment from the archives of Sippar. Hidden among 10 mundane accounts of livestock donations was this fragment, slipped between tablets like a secret. He ran his fingers over the grooves. One word caught his eye: Ekur, the mountain house, the name of Enlil's temple in Nippur. Destroyed long ago. Flooded. A prickling sense of danger crawled up his spine. The next morning, Nabu rose before the temple bells. He crossed the scribal quarter and climbed the steps to the upper chambers, where Bel Nadine still resided. The old scribe now lived in semi-retirement, mostly forgotten by the temple elite. His hands trembled from age, but his mind, Nabu hoped, remained sharp. He laid the tablet on the low cedar table. Bel Nadine stared at it for a long while. Then, with painful effort, he leaned forward, whispering each glyph aloud. His lips stopped, his face paled. Without looking at Nabu Rimani, he spoke. "Where did you get this?" "From Sippar, mixed in with tax records." The old man's eyes narrowed. "This is not a mistake. Someone wanted it found, but not by you." Nabu leaned in. "Why? What does it mean?" Bel Nadine sat back. "It speaks of a chamber beneath the Ekur, a sealed vault, a darkness bound by the Milam, the radiance of the divine." Nabu frowned. "I've seen that word before. In a hymn from Lagash, but only in fragments." "The Milam is not a blessing, boy," Bel Nadine said. "It is power and madness." He stood, coughing violently. "Burn it. Forget it. Before others find out what you've read." But Nabu Rimani would not burn it. He took the tablet and left. That night, Bel Nadine died in his sleep. At the morning bell, 2 men in black robes stood at Nabu's door. They wore temple seals on their shoulders and carried staffs tipped with obsidian. "Come with us," one said. They questioned him for hours. "Where did the tablet come from? Who gave it to you? What did you read? Did Bel Nadine say anything before his death?" He lied. He said he never showed the tablet to the old man. He said he did not understand the script. They watched him in silence. Then, without a word, they let him go. But he knew he was being watched. That evening, as the city fell into shadow, he returned to his chamber. He sealed the door behind him. He lit his lamp and read the tablet again. It spoke of a gate beneath the ziggurat, of symbols etched in stone, of a sarcophagus that could not decay. He copied the entire fragment onto fresh clay. He used the softest reed, the finest script. His hand did not tremble once. Outside, a jackal howled in the alleys near the canal. Inside, Nabu Rimani began to prepare for the descent. He did not yet know that what he would find beneath the Isagila would change not only his life, but the fate of all who walked under the gaze of Marduk. The ziggurat towered above the city like a mountain carved by human hands. From afar, it gleamed with baked bricks and turquoise tiles. Pilgrims gathered at its base each morning, bringing goats, doves, and jars of honey. Priests in white robes recited hymns from memory as offerings smoked upon altars. But Nabu Rimani no longer saw splendor in its 7 ascending layers. He saw walls, secrets, stone and silence wrapped around something Babylon had tried to forget. It had been 3 days since the death of Belnadine. The old scribe's funeral was swift, ceremonial. He was cremated beside the Euphrates with a modest clay jar of his favorite ink and a reed stylus placed beside him. No mention was made of his work. No temple hymns were recited in Sumerian. To the temple elite, he was simply a name, a burned body, and an opening for a new scribe. Nabu Rimani stood in the crowd, hooded, watching smoke drift toward the heavens. He felt nothing. Only the weight of the tablet beneath his robe. Each night since, he had been seeing dreams. Not mere flickers of memory or strange feelings. These were visions, coherent, luminous, terrifying. He dreamed of an open sky with stars that spun in spirals, not circles, of voices speaking in unison, in a language that wasn't spoken but known. He saw a mountain carved into steps, like the ziggurat, but deeper. Beneath it, a pit of obsidian stone, with 7 doors sealed by signs. On the 7th door was the symbol from the tablet, the eye surrounded by 7 stars. He awoke each time in sweat, fingers clenched as if he had been writing in his sleep. He often found clay dust under his nails. And once, a single word had been scratched into the table by his bed. Milam. He needed to see what lay beneath the Asagila. Not the temple above, with its guards and festivals and processions, but the roots, the old levels, the forgotten spaces buried in the foundation. He knew a way in. The temple of Marduk had long absorbed older structures. Beneath the temple were storerooms, crypts, and maintenance shafts, used centuries earlier when the city was first built. Most were sealed. Others were simply ignored. Nabu Rimani waited until after moonrise, when the priests retired and only the night sentinels walked the courtyard. He wrapped himself in a scribe's dark robe, pulled low over his face, and slipped through the rear passageways. His hands trembled only slightly as he pressed into the cracks of the old wall behind the secondary altar, a place where he once overheard an elder whisper, "The walls here are older than the temple itself." Behind a cracked frieze of Enki pouring water from a jug, he found the narrow entrance, a tunnel, black, low, and dry. He stepped in and disappeared from the world of men. The passageway sloped downward. Dust filled the air. The torch in his hand sputtered against the dry stone. Strange shapes, spiral carvings, unreadable symbols passed on the walls around him. He felt the heat of the upper temple vanish. The silence deepened. Then he found it. A threshold. A sealed stone doorway. Circular. Unlike any Mesopotamian design he knew. At the center, the eye and 7 stars. It wasn't just carved, it was inset, fused with the stone in a way he could not explain. As he drew close, a pressure filled the air, like the moment before a thunderclap. He reached out. His hand hovered, trembled, touched it. There was no sound, no burst of light, just a vibration in his bones, as if the stone itself remembered his name. The door opened with a grinding sigh. The chamber beyond was immense, circular, carved from black rock, smooth and then seamless. At its center lay a slab, not a sarcophagus, not exactly, but something like it, rectangular, covered in sigils, radiating a heatless glow. Along the walls, ancient tablets floated slightly above carved pedestals. Not resting, floating. The air shimmered faintly around them. He stepped inside. The moment he crossed the threshold, every sound ceased. His heartbeat became the only rhythm in the world. He moved slowly to the slab, looked down. A figure lay there, not mummified, not rotted, preserved. Human? No, human-shaped, but impossibly tall. Skin like polished stone, eyes closed. A faint golden shimmer hovered over its skin, like dew in sunlight. He felt himself kneel, unwilled. His hand touched the slab. And then he saw a city of light, not Babylon, but older. Its towers floated in the air, suspended by forces unknown. The people there glowed, not with torches, but from within. They spoke in symbols, not words, glyphs that passed between them in streams of light. He saw a figure, radiant, descend from the heavens. It brought fire to the people. Not flame, but knowledge, architecture, time, language. Then darkness. The figure betrayed the laws of the gods. It taught too much. The divine order was broken. Other beings came, terrible, winged, armored with flame. They struck the glowing figure down, imprisoned it beneath the earth, sealed it with signs. A voice echoed in his mind. I gave you the flame. I was cast down for your kind. Awaken me, Scribe. He gasped. He was lying flat on the stone floor. The torch had gone out and the slab was sealed. There was no glow, no light, no figure, only darkness and the mark, burned into his forearm. the eye, and 7 stars. He stumbled back through the corridor. His heart thudded like a war drum. He reached the upper halls just before dawn, covered in dust and blood and memory. As he emerged from the tunnel, a priest was waiting. Eyes sharp, hands folded, expression unreadable. "You were not missed," the man said quietly. "Not yet." Nabu said nothing. But the priest looked down at his arm, saw the mark, and he simply said, "Then it has begun." The sun rose over Babylon, gilding its terraces and palaces with golden light. But Nabu Rimani did not see it. He sat in his chamber, unmoving. His inked pot remained full, the stylus untouched. He stared at his arm. The skin was unbroken, but the mark was still there, black as obsidian. The eye surrounded by 7 stars. No matter how hard he washed, scrubbed, scraped, it would not fade. It wasn't ink. It wasn't a wound. It was something else. Something beneath the skin, etched into his spirit. There came a knock, not the gentle tap of a fellow scribe, a hard, deliberate knock, the kind that says, "We are not here to talk." Before he could speak, the door was pushed open. 4 temple guards entered, bronze helms, spears crossed over their chests. Behind them came the same priest who had spoken to him near the ziggurat's hidden passage. His name was Nergal Etir, a man of spotless robes and a face like stone. "You are summoned," the priest said coldly, "by the Ensi of the temple." Nabu said nothing. He stood slowly, wrapping a plain shawl around his shoulders. The priest's eyes lingered on his forearm. He said nothing, but he had seen. The temple courtroom was vast, domed, and silent. At its center, the Ensi, the high priest, sat upon a stone chair carved with scenes from the Enuma Elish. His eyes were rimmed with kohl, his lips barely moved as he read the accusations. Unauthorized entry into sacred precincts, desecration of the old sanctuary, possession of forbidden texts, attempted communion with sealed powers. Each charge was like a hammerfall, but Nabu stood tall, unyielding. "I did what I was born to do," he said quietly. "I seek truth. The tablet came to me." A murmur rippled through the chamber. The NC raised a hand. "Truth," he said, voice dry as the desert wind, "is not yours to uncover. There are things buried for a reason." Nabu opened his mouth to speak, but then felt it, heat from beneath the floor. A presence, the same as in the chamber beneath the ziggurat. And then a whisper, not a sound, a sensation, like light pressing against the walls of his mind. "Speak and I will burn them. Be still and you will live." He froze. The mark on his arm burned. He could feel it pulsing like a second heart. He chose silence. The sentence was exile. No death, no prison. Worse, banishment from the city of Marduk. He was to be taken beyond the river, beyond the canals, beyond the fertile fields, into the desert. No provisions, no maps, no coin, just the shawl on his shoulders and the fire in his blood. They left him at dusk. The guards pushed him from a reed boat and turned back without a word. The last light of Babylon shimmered in the distance, golden domes swallowed by the gathering dark. He turned away from the river and walked east. The desert was a world of silence. By day it burned. The sky hung low and white. By night it froze. The stars glittered like knives. Days passed. Nabu lived on bitter roots, scavenged beetles, and whatever scraps he found in abandoned shrines. He walked until his sandals broke, then walked barefoot. The mark on his arm never faded. It pulsed when the stars came out, especially when the constellation of the Archer crossed the sky, near the band of 7 stars. Then, on the 7th night, he saw the fire. Not a normal flame, no smoke, no flicker, just a column of pale blue light rising from a cluster of rocks. He approached slowly. There, seated beside the flame, was a woman, old as time. Her robes were tattered, her face half hidden beneath a veil. But her eyes, glowing faintly, saw him long before he spoke. "I've been waiting," she said. "You walk the path of the broken flame." Nabu collapsed to his knees. "Who are you?" he whispered. "The last of the oracles," she replied. "From before the temples, before the priesthood of lies." She pointed to his arm. "The mark has awakened, and now it cannot be unmade." She reached into the fire unharmed and withdrew a flat object wrapped in silver cloth. She handed it to him. It was a tablet, but blank. No symbols, no writing. "You are to write the next chapter," she said. "The stars are returning, the gate will open again. You must be its scribe." He stared at the tablet. It was warm in his hands. It pulsed once, like a heartbeat. They stayed together for 7 nights. The oracle lived in a cavern beneath the desert rock, filled with glyphs painted in ash and blood. She fed him from a pot that never emptied. Water flowed from a crack in the stone, sweet and cold. By firelight she told him stories of the first scribes, not of men, but of stars. Of beings who descended from the black star before time was counted. They wrote the first laws, not in words, but in will. One rebelled, gave the laws to flesh, to humans. That being was cast down, imprisoned, and waited. "Your line," she said, "comes from those who listened. You are not the first with the mark, but you may be the last." Nabu dreamed again. But these were not the wild visions of before. These were focused, deliberate. He stood at the center of Babylon, but it was not ruined. It was glowing, alive with impossible towers, flowing rivers of starlight. And at its heart, the ziggurat. But now it reached the clouds. Each level shimmered with a different color. And at the top, the eye, open, radiant. He walked inside, found the slab. This time, the figure rose. Eyes opened. Light poured out. And it spoke. "The seals weaken, the watchers stir. Write, Nabu, write what must be remembered. He awoke gasping. The tablet was now etched with one symbol, the eye. On the 8th morning, the oracle was gone. Only a message remained, scrawled in symbols only he could read. Go west, to the ruins, where your voice will echo. He walked for days, through dunes, through broken lands, until he found it. The ruins, old stone walls, broken pillars, a forgotten city swallowed by the sands. He entered the crumbled temple at its heart, sat at the base of a shattered obelisk, and began to write. The stylus in his hand moved without effort. The words formed themselves, cuneiform shapes unlike any taught in the scribal schools. He wrote of the black star, of the chained god, of the temple below the ziggurat, of Babylon's pride, of its fall, and of the return. When he finished, he was no longer alone. 7 figures stood around him, tall, silent, eyes glowing faintly. Each wore a robe marked by a different star. The central one stepped forward. You have remembered, it said. You have restored the line. It placed a hand upon the tablet. It turned to crystal and vanished, as did they. He sat alone again. The mark on his arm faded. His task was done. But the stars above began to shift, and Babylon, far to the west, began to tremble. The heat of the desert had faded. Night blanketed the ruins. But Nabu Ramani sat upright, eyes fixed on the heavens. Something had shifted. The stars no longer moved as they once had. The familiar constellations, the archer, the ram, the lion, appeared twisted, as if bent around an unseen force. At their center, pulsing faintly like a wound in the fabric of the sky, was the black star. It was awake. Far to the west, the city of Babylon stirred uneasily. Omens had multiplied, cattle birthing twins with a single head, wells running dry in a single night, temple fires extinguishing themselves during sacred rites, and above all, dreams. People across the empire had begun to whisper of strange dreams, visions of spiraling lights, of doors that opened to empty skies, of an eye that watched but did not blink. Even the king, Nabonidus, old, superstitious, half-mad, began to fear. He withdrew from the capital, retreating to the oasis of Tema, leaving his son Belshazzar to rule in his stead. But nothing could still the rising tide. In the temple archives, Nergal-Atir, the priest who once condemned Nabu Ramani, pored over forbidden scrolls. His hand trembled as he turned the brittle pages. The signs were too clear to ignore. An ancient glyph, an eye with 7 stars, had begun to appear on the skin of children. Always the 7th born. Always in dreams first, then upon the flesh. The priest summoned the council. But most were silent, others too afraid to speak. Only one word passed among them, in hushed tones barely above breath. The return. Nabu, meanwhile, traveled north. The oracle's message had planted a name in his mind. Eridu, the first city, now abandoned, swallowed by dust and myth. There, it was said, the old laws were first etched. There a temple once stood that did not honor Marduk or Enlil or even the moon god Sin, but a god forgotten, a god cast out. He arrived on the seventh day. Eridu was a ruin of ghosts, crumbled cigarettes half submerged in the dust. The air was dry but heavy, charged, as if lightning had once danced between the broken stones. In the center of what had once been a temple square, Nabu saw it, a door, not in a wall, but freestanding, black stone, smooth, seamless, unmarked save for a single symbol, the eye and the stars. As he approached, the mark on his arm flared to life. His heartbeat quickened. His hand reached out. He touched the stone, and the world cracked. There was no sound, no flash, just absence. A blink, and he was elsewhere. A vast plain of black glass stretched before him. Above, no sky, only layers of shifting light like a sea upside down. He stood in a memory, not his own. The voice came again, but no longer a whisper. It was clear now, echoing through the strange space, ancient and infinite. You have entered the fracture, the wound of time, the place where what was and what may be converge. A figure appeared, tall, clad in shifting robes of starlight. Its face was an ever-changing mask, sometimes his father's, sometimes the oracle's, sometimes his own. It raised a hand. The seal has weakened. Your words have power, but so do your silences. Babylon has forgotten the balance. It will remember through fire. Nabu tried to speak, but the figure pressed a hand to his chest, and suddenly he saw a flood of visions. The river Euphrates boiling as fire fell from the skies. The ziggurat splitting, revealing a light too bright to name. The king weeping beneath a sky gone black. The temples swallowed by the ground. A great city rising from the ruins, built not by men, but by stars. And above all, a book, his book, floating, glowing, its words rewritten by unseen hands. Then silence. He awoke. Eridu was gone. The door vanished. In his hands, a tablet, etched in script no human had carved. It glowed faintly, and the mark on his arm was gone. He turned and began the long journey back to Babylon. The year was 1899 CE. The Ottoman Empire was dying. European archaeologists swarmed the Mesopotamian plains, hungry for treasures of the ancient world. One such expedition, led by a young British scholar named Edward Halley, had uncovered a series of stone foundations near what was once Eridu. On the final day of the dig, One of the workers uncovered a strange stone slab, smooth, seamless, black as night. It bore no script the team could decipher, only a single glyph, an eye surrounded by 7 stars. Edward took the slab to London. It was displayed at the British Museum for a short time, labeled simply Unidentified Ritual Object Neo-Babylonian. Visitors reported strange dreams after viewing it. One night, the slab vanished. Security found no breach, only a single mark on the floor where it had rested. A burned shape, an eye. Years passed. In 2023, a digital archaeologist named Layla Haddad uncovered a series of encrypted symbols embedded in the satellite images of southern Iraq, patterns only visible for deep spectral infrared imaging. The pattern matched one thing: the glyph on the slab. She traced the path through ancient trade routes, riverbeds, and temple ruins. Each site, each node, formed part of a vast geometric lattice, a message encoded across the land itself. She published her findings. Most scholars ignored her, but others watched. Then, in 2025, during a routine excavation near what was once Babylon, a chamber was discovered beneath the old ziggurat. Inside, hundreds of tablets, cuneiform, but in an unknown dialect. And at the center, a crystal tablet, untouched by time, glowing faintly. Beside it, a skeleton seated upright. In its hand, a stylus. Its forearm bore a mark, black, unfaded, an eye and 7 stars. The text on the crystal tablet, once decoded, read, "To those who awaken, we were warned. We forgot. Now the city remembers. I was Nabu Ramani. I wrote the truth. And somewhere in the sky, impossibly distant, impossibly near, the black star pulsed." You've just heard the story of the Scribe of Babylon, a man who carried the weight of forgotten gods and broken stars. If you've made it this far, thank you. These stories live on because of people like you. People who choose to slow down, to remember, to feel. If you enjoyed the journey, let me know with a like and subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories from the ancient world. And if this story meant something to you, leave a comment and tell me what part stayed with you the most. Until next time, may the stars guide your dreams and the past whisper gently in your sleep.